For months, she endured in silence, swallowing his cruelty like bitter medicine. But when he finally crossed the line, her father, the newly appointed police chief of their small town, made sure justice wasn't just a word. The cafeteria at Crestwood Middle School wasn't loud or chaotic. No, its battles were fought in glances, whispers, and the subtle shifting of chairs. It was the kind of place where a glance could mark the difference between belonging and being forgotten. 13-year-old Amara Hayes sat alone at the very edge of the lunchroom, her fingers tracing the edges of her sandwich as if willing them to disappear. Across the room, she could hear them, 2 tables over. "Why is she always by herself?" someone whispered. "Guess nobody wants to sit with her." She'd heard it all before. Being an outsider wasn't new. As one of the few black students at Crestwood, she'd learned long ago that fitting in wasn't an option. So she faded into the background, quiet as a shadow, moving through the day hoping no one noticed. But Dylan Mercer always noticed. Dylan wasn't just another kid. He carried himself like the world belonged to him, son of a wealthy real estate tycoon, the kid teachers adored and parents welcomed into their homes. And for the past month, he'd made Amara his personal project. It began with little things, knocking her books off her desk, brushing against her too hard in the hall, actions small enough for teachers to dismiss as accidents. But it didn't stop there. Today, it was her lunch. She'd only unwrapped her sandwich when his hand darted out and snatched the bag from her table. She looked up to find him smirking. "What's on the menu, Hayes?" Dylan ripped open the bag, pulling out the sandwich like it offended him. "Turkey? That's it? Guess your dad's paycheck ain't cutting it." Behind him, laughter bubbled up from his friends. Amara's hands clenched beneath the table, her face tightening, but she stayed silent. She always did. Dylan leaned closer, his grin widening. "Hey, you should be thanking me, saving you from those carbs." He tossed the sandwich over his shoulder. It hit the floor with a dull splat. Amara's stomach churned. Still, she didn't move. Then his foot came down, grinding the sandwich into the tile. Oops. The world tunneled, shrinking down to her, the ruined sandwich, and the sharp sound of their laughter. She could feel their stares, waiting to see her break. But she wouldn't, not here. Slowly, she stood, gathered her things, and walked away. Past the tables, through the cafeteria doors, down the halls, until she reached the girls' bathroom near Oak Ridge Corridor. Inside, she locked the stall, sat on the closed toilet lid, and inhaled shakily. This wasn't new. She'd wait it out, slip back into class when the bell rang, pretend it never happened. Reporting it never worked. Teachers waved it off. The principal called it, kids being kids. Tomorrow, it'd start all over again, except tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, she'd fight back. And tomorrow, Dylan would push further than he ever had. But for now, she could only wait. When she got home that afternoon to 47 Birch Street, Amara barely spoke. She went straight to her room, closing the door gently behind her. She wasn't the type to slam doors. Even here, she knew how to disappear. But her father noticed. "Amara?" His deep voice reached through the door. "Everything okay?" She hesitated, tightening her grip on her backpack strap before setting it down. "Yeah. Just tired." A pause. A quiet sigh. "All right. Dinner's in an hour." She waited for his footsteps to retreat before she exhaled. He had enough to handle, adjusting to a new town, taking over the police department after the last chief left a mess. She wasn't going to burden him with middle school drama. She could handle it. Or so she thought. The next day, Dylan didn't wait for lunch. Before first period, as she pulled books from her locker, something slammed into her back. She stumbled forward, nearly hitting her head on the locker door. Laughter erupted behind her. Slowly, she turned. Dylan stood leaning against the lockers, smug. "My bad, Hayes. Didn't see you there." She clenched her fists, but stayed quiet. That's what he wanted, a reaction. But Dylan wasn't satisfied. By lunchtime, the whispers had spread. She didn't know who started them, but she had her suspicions. As she entered the cafeteria, voices followed her. "Did you hear?" She tried to fight Dylan. "No way." "Yeah," swung at him and everything. "Bet," she bawled after. Her steps faltered. Dylan sat at his usual spot, scrolling his phone, grin plastered across his face. Her hands gripped her hoodie tight. This was worse than the pushing, the stolen lunch. This was isolation. He wasn't just making fun of her. He was making sure no one dared stand beside her. And it worked. She ate alone that day. And the next. And the next. By Friday, she hoped he'd gotten bored. She was wrong. The final bell rang, and Amara walked toward the school's front doors, relieved to leave. She'd almost made it to the edge of the parking lot when his voice called out, "Hey, Hayes." She ignored him. "Where you going?" "Thought we were friends." She quickened her pace. A hand grabbed her wrist. She yanked free and spun around. "Don't touch me." Dylan grinned, leaning close. "Relax, just saying hi." His friends laughed behind him, the sound sharp and familiar. Amara's heartbeat thundered in her ears. "Leave me alone." He leaned even closer, his voice low. "Or what? Gonna run to Daddy?" "Go ahead. Nobody cares." He flicked her backpack strap. "Face it, you're nothing." Something inside her snapped. Without thinking, she shoved him hard. Dylan stumbled, his grin faltering. For a second, he looked surprised. And that should have been the end, but it wasn't, because Dylan wasn't used to losing. And in that moment, he decided to make sure she paid for it. Amara had no idea how far he'd go. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Her mind replayed the scene over and over, the push, the look on his face, the moment his friends stopped laughing. She'd never stood up to him before. And now, she had no clue what tomorrow would bring. Saturday passed quietly. So did Sunday. By Monday, she let herself believe maybe it was over. She should have known better. It started with the stares. Then the whispers. By third period, it turned into something else. As she walked down Willow Hall, phones angled in her direction. Some kids pointed. Others snickered. Some just shook their heads, pity or amusement in their eyes. Her stomach coiled tight. In language arts, she slid into her seat, head down, ignoring the murmurs. Then a voice behind her, "Nice pic, Hayes." Her head snapped up. Sophie Randall was grinning, her phone raised. Dread knotted Amara's chest. She scrambled for her own phone, unlocked it. Her notifications flooded in, and then she saw it. A photo of her, taken in the parking lot as she shoved Dylan. But someone had edited it. Her face twisted into a grotesque snarl, bold red letters stamped across. "Crazy Hayes can't control herself." Her hands trembled. Beneath the post, comments piled up. "Yikes, what's wrong with her? No wonder she's alone. Dylan should have knocked her down." "I heard she clawed his face." It wasn't just rumors now. It was evidence, twisted, distorted, impossible to explain away. Her throat tightened. Sophie leaned closer, voice syrupy. "Dylan says you've got anger issues. Maybe you should get some help." Amara stared at the screen, the words burning into her mind. Around her, the whispers kept going. But inside, something shifted. Something colder, sharper than before. And she knew, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Amara's pulse raced beneath her skin. She stared straight ahead, her nails biting into her palms, trying to hold herself together. She had never felt so humiliated. By lunchtime, everyone had seen the photo. By the final bell, it was all anyone could talk about. By the time she stepped through the front door at home, she felt hollow. Her father was waiting in the living room, phone in hand. His expression was calm, but too calm. "Amara," he said evenly, "come sit down." Her stomach twisted. Slowly, she dropped her backpack by the door and sat on the couch, her shoulders tense. Her father turned his phone toward her. It was the same photo, the same cruel words stamped across it. His face was unreadable. "You want to explain this?" Amara's chest tightened. I didn't do anything." "I know," he said quietly. His gaze darkened. "And I know exactly who did." A lump formed in her throat. "Dad, please," but he was already dialing. And in that moment, Amara knew Dylan had pushed things too far. Her father wasn't a man who raised his voice. He didn't make threats. When he was angry, he went still. The silence between them was heavy as he held the phone to his ear. "Listening, Principal Larson," he said calmly, "we need to talk. Now." Amara sat frozen as the conversation unfolded. She could only hear bits and pieces: serious matter, online harassment, immediate action. Then, "No, this isn't something we'll monitor. I expect results tonight." An hour later, they were in the car, pulling up to Crestwood Middle under the pale glow of the parking lot lights. Inside, the building felt eerily quiet. Principal Larson was waiting at the front office, arms crossed tightly over his chest. "Chief Hayes," he greeted with a stiff smile, "I understand there's been an incident." Her father wasted no time. "My daughter has been harassed for weeks. Today it escalated to public defamation. I'm here for answers." He held up his phone, displaying the photo. "This is what I want taken down. And I want the boy responsible held accountable." The principal shifted uncomfortably. "I spoke to Dylan's parents. They assured me." "I'm not interested in their assurances," her father interrupted, his voice steely. "I'm interested in what you're going to do." Principal Larson hesitated. "We don't want to be punitive over a lapse in judgment." Her father leaned in slightly. "A lapse in judgment?" His voice dropped. "Let me be clear, this is targeted harassment. It's defamation. And you're enabling it by doing nothing." He paused. "If you don't act, I will." The principal paled. "We'll look into disciplinary action." "No," her father said sharply. "You'll enforce disciplinary action. Or I'll bring in the school board. And the media. And every legal channel available." At that moment, the office door swung open. Dylan Mercer stepped inside, flanked by his parents. His father was broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. His mother wore a practiced, brittle smile. Dylan, for once, wasn't smirking. "Chief Hayes," Gregory Mercer greeted, his tone silky. "Surely we can settle this without theatrics." Her father didn't blink. "Your son made it theatrical." Mrs. Mercer gave a light laugh. "Come now. Boys will be boys. This doesn't warrant punishment." Amara's fists clenched. "Punishment? This wasn't a prank." Her father's voice stayed level. "If Amara had done this to Dylan, would you call it a joke? Or would you have a lawyer already drafting a lawsuit?" Gregory's smile tightened. "Let's not make this personal." "It's already personal," her father replied quietly. "And it ends tonight." He turned to Principal Larson. "What's the school's decision?" The principal swallowed hard. "Effective immediately, Dylan is suspended." The room fell silent. Mrs. Mercer gasped. "Suspended? For a harmless picture?" Gregory's expression darkened. "This isn't over." Her father met his glare without flinching. "You're right. It isn't." Dylan shifted uneasily beside his parents, suddenly very small in the shadow of their outrage. But this time, he wasn't grinning. He looked scared. The next day, Dylan Mercer didn't show up to school. Or the next. By Friday, the whispers started. His dad tried to fight the school board. His mom threatened to sue the district. Someone said they're pulling him out and sending him to private school. Amara heard them all, but she stayed silent. She walked the halls quietly, head high. The stares that used to sting were different now. They weren't filled with mockery or pity. They carried something else, recognition. By Monday, the photo had vanished from every account. Principal Larson made a morning announcement about online harassment and zero-tolerance policies. Words that once meant nothing suddenly carried weight. By Wednesday, the whispers had faded. The eyes that once followed her now looked away, or nodded, subtle signs of respect she wasn't used to receiving, and at lunch, she still sat alone. But today, something shifted. A tray clattered across from her. She looked up to see Sophie Randall sliding into the seat. Amara tensed, waiting for another jab. But Sophie stared at her tray, awkward. "So, I guess you kinda won." Amara said nothing. Sophie sighed. "Look, I wasn't trying to be part of it. She trailed off. "You just laughed," Amara said quietly. Sophie winced. "Yeah." She hesitated. He had it coming, though. Amara stood, picking up her tray. Sophie's gaze lifted, guilt softening her expression. Amara paused. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't the one shrinking away. She had the choice now. And she walked away, feeling the weight finally lift from her shoulders. Dylan Mercer was the one hiding now. And maybe, just maybe, that meant things had finally started to change. That evening, Amara sat at the kitchen table as her father poured coffee, the quiet hum of the house around them. "How's school?" he asked casually. Amara shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. "Better." He raised an eyebrow. "Just better?" She leaned forward. "I've been thinking. I want to talk to Principal Larson tomorrow. I want to start something. A club. For kids like me. So no one has to sit alone." Her father's smile grew, warm and proud. "A place to belong." Amara nodded. "Yeah." He lifted his mug in a quiet toast. "That's my girl." And for the first time, Amara didn't just feel stronger. She felt powerful. She was done surviving. She was ready to lead. Amara smirked faintly. "Well, better than it was last week." A ghost of a smile crossed her father's face. "That's good." He took a slow sip of his coffee. "You know, I'm proud of you." She blinked. "For what?" "I didn't do anything." He set his mug down gently. "You stood up for yourself." Amara hesitated. "I shouldn't have had to." His expression softened. "No. You shouldn't have." She exhaled, tracing a finger along the grain of the wooden table. "What's gonna happen to Dylan?" Her father leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "That's up to him." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He studied her carefully. "Actions have consequences. He's learning that now. Whether he changes or not, that's on him." Amara fell silent, letting that sink in. For so long, Dylan had seemed untouchable, protected by the right friends, the right family, the right last name. He walked through the world like nothing could touch him. But he had been wrong. Amara wasn't afraid of him anymore. And maybe that, more than anything, was the real victory, because this time, when she walked into school, she wasn't the one looking over her shoulder. Amara never saw Dylan Mercer again. By the end of the week, he was gone. Some said his family transferred him to a private academy in another district. Others whispered he'd been sent to a boarding school out of state. Whatever the truth, he had vanished. And for the first time in a long time, Amara could breathe, but Dylan's absence didn't magically fix everything. The scars of his cruelty, the long months of humiliation, they didn't disappear overnight. There were still the stares, the whispers that died when she passed by, the classmates who didn't know whether to pretend nothing had happened or acknowledge that everything had. Amara wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. Instead, she did something she'd never dared before. She raised her hand in class. Spoke up when she had something to say. Met people's eyes when she walked down the halls. And slowly, very slowly, the isolation began to crack. On Friday, a girl from her science class slid into the seat beside her at lunch. She didn't say much, just a quiet, "Hey." The next day, someone asked if she wanted to be in their group for a project instead of waiting for the teacher to assign her. By Monday, a boy from literature class, a quiet kid who'd never gotten involved in anything, muttered as he passed her locker, "What he did was messed up." Amara turned. "What?" The boy adjusted his backpack strap, barely glancing at her. "Just, if I'd known it was that bad, he trailed off, shaking his head. "Doesn't matter." But it did. It mattered because people were finally seeing. Not just her, but what had happened. What they'd let happen. Because silence had been its own kind of crime, she didn't say anything, just gave him a small nod. That was enough. That night, she sat in the living room, flipping through a book while her father read the Riverton Gazette. The TV murmured in the background, playing a detective show neither of them was really watching. "You know," her father said, folding the newspaper and setting it down, "I had my own Dylan Mercer when I was your age." Amara looked up. "Yeah?" He nodded. Didn't have social media back then, but the game was the same. He leaned back, his gaze distant. "There's always someone who thinks they can get away with it." Amara hesitated. "Did you do anything about it?" He exhaled slowly. "I didn't have a choice." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned to her, his expression steady. "I had to decide, let him tell me who I was, or decide that for myself." Amara swallowed. Her father's lips curved into a quiet smile. "I'm sitting here, aren't I?" A small laugh escaped her, surprising them both. "Yeah, guess you are." He patted her shoulder gently. "And so are you." She sat with that for a while. For so long, it had felt like Dylan held all the power, like he dictated the rules, like she had no control. But that wasn't true. She had made a choice to speak, to fight, to push back. And that had made all the difference. On Monday morning, she walked into school. The halls felt different, or maybe she was different. Sophie Randall gave her a brief nod from across the hallway. Not an apology. Not an excuse. But something close enough. The boy from literature class held the door open for her without saying a word, and at lunch, a girl from history class approached her table. "Mind if I sit here?" the girl asked. Amara looked at her for a moment, then shrugged. "Go for it." She wasn't waiting for an apology from the whole school. She didn't need one. Because she'd already won, not by getting rid of Dylan Mercer, but by making sure someone like him wouldn't win so easily next time, because next time, people wouldn't just look away. No one should have to fight for basic respect. No one should have to prove they deserve to exist without being harassed. But the truth is, standing up for yourself isn't easy. Sometimes people will look away. Sometimes they'll pretend it's not happening, but silence helps bullies win. And the moment you refuse to be silent, the moment you refuse to let them define you, that's when they lose their power. If this story spoke to you, consider subscribing to our newsletter. Because these conversations matter. And the more we talk about them, the harder it becomes for anyone to pretend they don't.